under some utilitarian rationale. At first, the British took all the forest under monopoly. They wanted to extract timber as tribute and finance their whole activities in India by timber exploitation. So the Van Gujars were seen as people that were actually destroying the forest, where the purpose of the British was to destroy the forest as well. So it was about who's going to destroy the forest. And then after, well, India focused a lot on industrialization, providing services in cities, and then the whole trend of setting aside protected areas started as well. And the Van Gujar were kind of caught in between like growing cities on the one hand and reserved areas on the other. So they proved very adaptive and resilient to a way, to a certain extent, but the complexity now with all these added borders and problems, and also like some of them just try to start to find that their lifestyle might not be so beneficial for them. I mean, there's some families that did agree by themselves to go and resettle, but there's still like about 80% of the community that is resisting every attempt at resettlement, and they at least like when they express themselves on public tribune, they want to remain nomadic herders, but it's growing difficult for them. So the reserve forest, they say, the protected areas are a major impediment to the migrations, which and without migration they could not have these herds because the buffalo can't stay in the summer in the low plains. It's not an animal that tolerates the heat, and that's why the whole settlement program changes their lifestyle like from A to Z kind of thing. So a couple, maybe two stories before I finish shortly. So on January 1st, 2008, after years in limbo, the Scheduled Tribes and other traditional forest dwellers Recognition of Forest Act, that's a useful mouthful, so usually we call it the Forest Right Act, this guy. Which I have, it's a bilingual thing if you want. Finally came into force. It's written in 2006, so like the first time that the law was talked about and read in Parliament was in 2006, but it took like a year and a half of consultation to settle the details. So it's written in there that the goal of the law is to repair the historical injustice perpetrated against the forest dwellers of India. So forest dwellers now, through the meaning of this law, have a way to claim right the land they've been occupying for like on a traditional or customary basis. The problem, of course, with the nomadic Van Gujar is that which land do they claim? The whole thing? That's never going to go, right? But so they're still like confronted to a problem of difference where they're nomadic and laws are set for settled people. And it's pretty funny, well, it's not funny at all, but let's think it's funny so like we don't cry over this. But the main goal of the law is to repair historical injustice. Yet the same year, the Van Gujar, because the mandate of the Govind Park was expanded, were denied to enter the Govind Park, which they had been able to deal like a seasonal entrance year after year, on a year basis. Like there had been never any promise made to them that they could come back the next year. But they were stopped. The park was now a hotspot for the conservation of the snow leopard. So they had to stay a month over their usual schedule in the lowland, which is very hard for the animal. The animals like just kind of lose their fat content, and some of them die. The young ones they really have a hard time for that. The thing is, like, I was in the context of having a new law, and like nowadays India, it's kind of a farce. The real tragedy happened in the 1880s, 130 years before that, where the same thing happened in the same place, but it was the British that were saying, this is our forest, you don't have a right for it. So history is just repeating itself like that from the Van Gujar point of view, at least. So, there have been as well like programs, a lot in Nepal, some in India, about like joint forest management and not so new, not so old approaches where people will be included in or could participate into forest management in India. But the whole framework, like the whole way that works, still remains pretty authoritative, and it's always the forest department that puts out the agenda, and then people have to fit their own smaller agendas in the bigger ones set out by the department. So usually, like in face of experts and foresters that continue to lead in command, the Van-Gujars don't have a whole lot to say. Which is sad, because the Van-Gujars have been, quite interestingly, proposing alternatives to the management of parks in India. They even have published through NGO an alternative conservation program for Gigi National Park, I mean, a whole program. And that was based on like their own experience of the land, their hardship. But still nowadays, the whole idea of like resettlement and getting the Gujars out of the park is still pretty strong. So, if I am bringing this to conclusion, so like the goal for my future researches for me is to understand like what is the environment for the Van-Gujar, see how they talk into like terms of caring for animals, having to deal with wild animals, or just like leading the herds on roads across cities, having to keep a functional relationship with a whole lot of people that have settled in the valleys and along the routes they are taking. And I want to see like if that whole experience of being a Van-Gujar at some point comes to be reflected in levels, in wider circles within the nation, to see if a group like them that on so many points is different, but yet in contact with everybody, and that tries to use all the democratic mechanism there is out there to get their point passed. Are they changing anything? Are they being listened to? Are they being taken in account at some point? Not saying that the fault is resting on anybody else's shoulder at the other end, that like, oh, you're not listening to the Van-Gujar. It's not that. I'm just saying, are the democratic channels effective to take a very foreign, like for our own experience, a very foreign practice of like moving year round and, you know, caring for animals before, actually they have stories, I've heard really strange stories about like how they care about their animals before they care for their children. I think this is a prose of, you know, it's kind of not very helpful to the Van-Gujars to be portrayed as people that care for animals more than humans, but that's another debate. But yeah, so they don't relate to our own experience very much, but maybe, this is the goal of this, maybe they still leave an imprint into India. And if that's the case, then that means that the myth of India is being changed by the people that actually inhabit it. And maybe we should not be talking about like the Indian nation, but how India is thriving because of like different pockets of people with different expectations, but that still push forward to get listen in the democratic environment. Thank you.
How did you come to choose the Van-Gujars as your research subject? I'm curious, in going with them, working with them, what are some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, I have my relation to the Van-Gujars is pretty embryonic. The most intense moment was maybe 2 minutes long. I was somebody that told I told somebody at an assembly, a village assembly, which like they take part of, which is a big thing for them because they literally come out of the jungle and they go with all like the local Tongia, which are tribe people or other caste Hindu people, sit there. They just come out of the jungle and have a talk. And I was talking to a social activist, a friend of mine, and I said, oh yeah, I read some things about the bamboo jar, and listened like to when they had to sit through the day. And I told this guy I would be interested to work with them. It would be interesting to see like, you know, how they migrate and all of that. And I got introduced like that. Not even like his name is Pierre, and he's gonna go with you in immigration. And so you have Noor Jamal that just goes, all right, good. I mean, the beef of my presentation really comes from published material. I haven't started to work with them yet, and so like I will settle the details of actually how I'm gonna connect with them because they will be in the higher pastures. I will be coming back next year and we'll come down together. All these details and how I'm gonna be integrated in the community still like I still need to figure out, and that's what I'm gonna do after. Why I took them? Because of all these differences. I mean, to me, they are they're very combative people in a way. They change the name, right? They're simple Gujars. For most people, they're simple Gujars, and they don't have the right to change their name, but they did change the name to Van Gujar because by including the word Van, forest, in their name, they thought it would be like a good political move to claim their right to the forest. Just by hearing like all these details, and Noor Jamal has been in prison and released the next day because like he entered the park and things like that. These are the kind of fights I usually follow, so I just fell along the lines of research as I do. I didn't really know about them before I went into these assemblies a couple times.
How many? And is it one group or like a split up?
So actually, they're like the Gujars per se that like are herders. You can find like from Iran to Pakistan to Jammu Kashmir to here. The Van Gujars by themselves, the census I have for Rajaji was contradictory, but about 1,000 families. So some of them I think are counted like the families that have resettled as well, and that's about 200 families. But the numbers I have are really fragmentary. Unfortunately, like I didn't find a study that was well documenting the thing, and in that study there's two numbers that don't match each other, so like I say that out with reserve. I'm not quite sure about it. The groups I've been working with are like a pretty small group actually.
And how many animals?
Per household, I think it's around what 6, but these numbers I have are dating. Unfortunately for me, like they don't come out with their herds when they just come out of the bush and come to talk to us. But I'll get to know about that for sure. Yeah, and I mean I'll pay attention to it because like some people have been critical of the Gujar sayings, well, they want it all. They have bigger herds than before. So just because they've been accused of like herding more animals and being like kind of trying to modernize and being like cattle or buffalo capitalists. Well, I'll see if that's like, if there's any debates in that, if their herds have been like bigger than before. And
So do they sell the buffalo milk or
yeah, milk.
they sell it?
Yeah.
And then you drink it?
And drink.
But they don't eat the meat?
No.
But how do they manage when they're up in the hills and then Himalayas? Where do they sell the milk then? And then in Rajaji, then they of course sell it.
Yeah. Well, there's even an association that has a truck down in the valley. I don't know if they go up there as well. I mean, the system before was really tuned up, right? Because like they had to live in the periphery of other villages to trade because they never grow a crop. So everything they have or they had in the past was for barter. So I'll do this and that. They used to do butter. when they were up in the hills. I guess this is still a solution for them, right? So the milk doesn't go bad, and they can like sell the bottle